Chapter 7. They ate at a small French restaurant tucked away on a side street. San Francisco was full of small, interesting restaurants off the beaten path. Luke, who loved to eat as much as he loved to cook, knew them all. It was fascinating to observe how people, men as well as women, were ogling her two escorts. Luke wore bright yellow suspenders over a collarless blue and white pinstripe shirt, navy dockers and boat shoes, no socks. Nick was decked out in a double-breasted charcoal suit. Both looked hunky and gorgeous. Catherine felt like a thorn between two roses. "Don't look now, Nick." She did an over-there jerk of her chin. "But there's a sultry blonde at the table near the pillar who's about to fall out of her seat trying to get your attention." "Actually," Nick grinned without looking, "she's had my attention. It's Luke's attention she's trying to attract now." Catherine's heart pinched. "How lovely. You share girlfriends. It must make life so much easier when you can give each other insider tips." Luke shot a sidelong glance across the room. "Want an intro, old son?" Nick murmured. "Maybe later." Luke picked up his water glass, drank deeply, then turned to Catherine. "What do you have planned for this afternoon?" "To see you in the middle of the day." "Shopping!" "What kind of shopping?" Nick asked. "If it's clothes, I'll go with you." "Would you?" "That would be terrific, Nick. You have an appointment at 2, remember?" Luke reminded him. Nick looked blank. "You told me you were seeing... can't remember who it was, but someone." "Huh?" "Oh. Yeah. Someone." "Right. If you want company, Kat," Luke offered, "I've got the afternoon free. I can show you some good places to shop." The fact that Luke, who loathed shopping, wanted to accompany her and had outmaneuvered Nick was grounds for celebration. "I'd love you to come with me, Luke. I want to look for a couple of pairs of sandals." She took a sip of coffee and caught Nick's eye over the rim of her cup. Those deep blue eyes challenged her. "And underwear," she added casually. "Underwear?" Luke repeated. "Yeah, lingerie. The slinky stuff." Nick rose, tossed his napkin on the table, and stood behind Catherine's chair, his hand on her shoulder. "I'm devastated to miss this shopping trip. I love to shop. Catch you next time, Catherine." He squeezed her shoulder, then said to Luke, "I'm off to see Mrs. Somebody. Take care of my girl." Thank God she didn't model any of the stuff she was looking at. Luke would have had a stroke. As it was, he was grateful to be sitting. He was as hard as petrified wood just watching Kat slide wispy bits of see-through silks and laces through her fingers before taking them into the dressing room. Surely to God none of those teddies would fit a grown woman. There wasn't more than 5 inches of fabric in the entire garment. "You must be bored out of your mind," Kat emerged, a dozen satin hangers in each hand. Luke sat conspicuously on a spindly peach satin lady's chair. "I'm fine. Take your time. I'm far too horny to stand or walk." Luke dredged up a smile. "Really, Kat, I'm kinda enjoying the scenery. Take as long as you like." He'd never thought to frequent lingerie stores to troll for females. Too bad he couldn't care less about his new discovery. Kat glanced around, as if only now noticing the store was filled with women. "Almost done. What do you think of these?" These consisted of a bra that looked like 2 smiles of pale purple satin and a stamp-sized sliver of supple lime green silk. There wasn't much to the top, and the bottom consisted of a short length of matching dental floss. There wasn't a single fluff of lace or frou-frou on either garment. Kinda plain, aren't they? Like wearing nothing at all. I like the colors. Then buy them. She'd look like a mermaid, with a sexy, slippery wisp of green covering her long, sexy, slippery body. The skimpy top would barely cover her breasts. Those delectable, peach-tipped. "Buy them all and let's get out of here." "You said you wanted shoes?" "There are a couple of reasonable places in the next block. I've got an appointment in a couple of hours. We'd better make tracks." "But you said..." "Hey, a man can only stand so much of a good thing. $500 worth of intimate apparel fit into a tiny shopping bag. The smaller the garment, apparently, the higher the price." Luke felt much more himself when they walked into the shoe store. There was nothing remotely sexy about feet, in his opinion. His libido had taken a beating in the lingerie boutique. But now he could relax. He sat on one of the uncomfortable chairs lined up in the center of the store as Kat wandered around. That creamy yellow dress was dynamite on her. The color brought out the fire in her hair. Luke watched her through narrowed eyes. The simple style suited her. The square-necked, sleeveless dress had no waistline and gently fell to just above her knees. setting off long limbs lengthened by high heels. Around her throat and draped between her breasts, Kat wore a heavy, almost barbaric necklace consisting of large cream and bronze beads and hammered copper squares. He'd bought the necklace and matching earrings and bracelet for her in Africa several years ago. At the time, he'd imagined Kat wearing just that pagan jewelry, nothing else. Instead of hand-delivering his gift, Luke had mailed it to her in Oregon. Then he turned off the phone and got blind drunk for 2 days. "Sorry. Are you in a coma?" Kat asked, giving him a sympathetic glance as she sat beside him. "I'd like to try these, please," she told the salesman, hovering ingratiatingly nearby. She gave him her size and a handful of left shoes, and he trundled off. Luke dredged up a smile and shifted slightly so they weren't quite so close. "I told you I'm fine, although I've got to admit I don't have the patience for shopping that Nick does. Man, that guy shops as enthusiastically as a woman. On the other hand, he never told me what a treasure trove lingerie shops are. Haven't you ever bought sexy lingerie for one of your girlfriends?" "Hell no," Kat laughed. "Why not?" Luke was saved from answering by the salesman's return with several boxes, which he placed on the floor at Kat's feet like an offering. "I'll be back in a jiff," he assured her, then scurried off for more. Luke didn't buy sexy lingerie for women. 1, because he hated to shop, never went to malls, and frankly, it had never occurred to him to casually stroll into a potpourri-scented pink store. 2, because by the time he could order anything from a catalog, the woman would have been long gone, only to be replaced by someone who might not be the same size. He slouched in his chair. His knee brushed Kat's bare legs as he shifted. She smelled so damn good he wanted to forget the promises he'd made and lick her. All over. Then go back for seconds. And thirds. The salesman knelt before Kat. "May I?" he asked, removing the shoes from the box beside him and stripping out the paper stuffing. Catherine offered her foot. The man slid on a high-heeled red sandal. "Oh my, these shoes were made for you. Look how well they show off this glorious high arch of yours." "Dream on," Luke grumbled under his breath. The salesman cast him a wary glance as he produced the other damn shoe. Luke's mouth went Sahara dry. His eyes glommed on, riveted to her slender, tanned foot sliding slowly into that shoe. She had the sexiest feet he'd ever seen. High instep, neat little toes, nails painted a glossy fire engine red. His erection had merely been lying dormant. It came back to life in a hurry. Oxygen drained out of his brain, leaving him dizzy. Kat's feet were sexy as hell. Who would have thunk it? He thought without humor. He wanted to slide those sandals on her himself. Luke closed his eyes. He pictured himself holding her heel in his palm, his other hand slipping the shoe slowly over her toes. Pictured his hand gliding up the smooth, lightly tanned, highly freckled length of her leg. Up, to a wisp of a thong of lime green silk. "Well, what do you think?" Kat stood, wriggling her toes and looking down at him. Luke refocused and cleared his throat. "Buy them in every color they have." Kat frowned, then turned to the salesman. "Let me try on a few of the others." While Kat and the man conferred on colors and styles, Luke congratulated himself on his fortitude and self-sacrifice. He was a prince among men to resist her under so much temptation. His eyes zeroed in on her sexy toes again. Yeah, a saint. Catherine sang at the top of her voice as she walked into the living room fresh from a shower, rubbing her hair with a towel and heading for the kitchen. She screeched to a stop mid-note when she saw Luke. He looked up from the book in his lap. "Hey, you're home early," she said unnecessarily. Grinning, he demanded, "What did you do with the money?" "What money?" "The money for the singing lessons. Haha, spent it the same place you did those dancing lessons, Van Buren." He wore white shorts and a tank top that had seen better days. He'd changed while she'd been in the bathroom, and had tossed the clothes he'd worn to work on the table by the front door. One of his shoes was near the bedroom door, the other under the coffee table. His socks decorated the lampshade. "I had the bathroom door closed. You could have come in and changed in the bedroom, you know." "Yeah, right," Luke said dryly. His eyes skimmed down the now damp cotton jersey of her sundress and back to her face. They were having a heat wave. The most she could bear having next to her skin was the skimpy, bright yellow tank dress and cotton underwear. "Yeah, right?" "Yeah, right. I could have, but I didn't." "Hey," Molly Cruz called. "She wants you to call her back." Catherine plucked his clothes off the table and lampshade and stood with the bundle in her arms. His shirt smelled so terrific she wanted to bury her nose in it. Luke sweat. She really was losing it. Thanks. I'll call her back tomorrow. She took his clothes into the bedroom and tossed them into the hamper. Luke raised his voice through the open door. Don't you miss your friends back home? I talk to Molly, Susan, and some of the others almost every other day. Luke. She came back pushing wet hair behind her shoulders, enjoying the coolness. Which is pretty much what we've been doing for the last year or so anyway. The distance hasn't made much difference. Yeah, but wasn't there someone special? Catherine frowned at him. What was she missing here? Susan and Molly have been my best friends since 2nd grade, you know that. A guy. Cat. A guy. No. She sank onto the sofa, curled her legs under her, stuffed one of the new cushions behind the small of her back, picked up Sports Illustrated from the coffee table to fan herself. The cool, wet strands of her hair felt great slithering down her back. She swung her head, enjoying the sensation. Luke stared at her, his eyes somewhat glazed. He cleared his throat. What about a nipple? A what? He looked blank for a second. Nippon. You know, a Japanese car? I was thinking you probably need a vehicle of some sort. Something small to drive around town. Easy to park. Good gas mileage on the freeway. She could have sworn he'd said, God, she had sex on the brain. I don't think I'll need a car, do you? If I want to go anywhere, I'll just take the bus or a cab. You can always use the Jag. He looked her up and down. Heavy date tonight? Nope. I'm in. You? In. For a second, she thought he'd go back to reading the book he clutched hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He looked up again. Want to take in a nice air-conditioned movie? You could have stopped at the words air-conditioned. I'd go anywhere cool right now. I had no idea San Francisco could get this hot. She uncurled her legs and rose to go to the kitchen. I have yesterday's newspaper. Let's see what's on. As long as it's nothing with gushing blood, shed it as she returned with the paper and spread it out on the crowded coffee table. And nothing too schmaltzy, he warned as she crouched down to find the movie section. Why don't you push the fishbowl and 29 of those plants out of the way? Cleo doesn't like to be moved, Catherine said, lifting the paper over the fishbowl and a thriving Dieffenbachia and closer to Luke. She shifted so that she had to practically lean over his knees to see the print. No vampires. She ran her hand through her wet hair. Do you think Cleo is lonely? Fish don't get lonely. He didn't move when she rested an elbow on his knee, but he cleared his throat. No costume dramas. She wrapped an arm about his knee and leaned a little more of her weight against his leg. Rigor mortis set in as he froze. Catherine pretended to watch Cleo blow bubbles and swim in circles as she settled comfortably against him. Her unfettered breast brushed against his bare knee. She looks lonesome to me. I think I'll buy her a friend tomorrow. Then Luke cleared his throat. Be prepared to be grandparent to a bunch of tadpoles. Catherine laughed. Fish have fish. Frogs have tadpoles. Same thing. Not to the frogs and the fishies, it isn't. Keep the bowl in the bedroom then. I don't think I can handle fish procreation while I'm trying to watch CNN. Interesting subject for Luke to bring up. And nothing too smoochy either, he warned, before she could suggest the new romantic comedy at the Roxy. Catherine pushed damp hair out of her face. Jim Carrey? What time? 7:15. She used Luke's leg to lever herself to her feet. His thigh muscles flexed beneath her palm. I have to dry my hair. His gray-green eyes darkened. And get dressed. I'm perfectly decent. Why can't I go like this? Put on a bra. Catherine hid her smile as she went off to dry her hair. It wasn't a date, but it sure felt like one to Luke. The theater was dark, and the movie, at any other time, would have captivated his attention. Small problem, Catherine Ann Harris sat beside him, close beside him. In the old theater, the seats were too narrow and far too close together. He'd had to extend his legs into the aisle to accommodate their length. Kat had to sit at an angle to accommodate hers, which meant she was practically in his lap. She smelled of peach soap and popcorn, a fragrance Luke was rapidly becoming addicted to. The huge tub of popcorn was on her lap. When he wanted to grab a handful, his arm brushed her firm breast. Without looking at what she was doing, Kat fumbled for the giant soda he held on his own lap. Her fingers brushed his chest. He drew in a deep breath and handed her the paper cup. Thanks, she whispered against his cheek, eyes fixed on the screen. Her lips closed around the straw. Luke squeezed his eyes shut in self-defense. He imagined those lips closing around him. "I'm going out," he whispered harshly. "Be right back." Luke pulled open the door to the men's room. He couldn't handle this. Could not handle this. He sat in a stall and stared at the graffiti on the back of the door. He wanted Kat. No, he more than wanted her. He'd desired women before. But what he felt for Kat was deeper, more complex. Just more, damn it. That wasn't going to go away. In fact, if anything, it was getting worse by the minute. He couldn't concentrate at work. He wasn't getting any sleep. His appetite was shot to hell. Luke felt the familiar tug-of-war he'd been experiencing for years, his own need balanced with honor. Half of him wanted to come right out and show Kat how much he wanted her. The other half remembered what a tender heart she had, how easily she could be hurt. Been there, done that. The night of her 17th birthday party came to mind, and the sharp sting of his father's disapproval as he'd yelled, "Don't go thinking you can use that girl to scratch an itch. She's not her mother. Catherine is a forever woman." His father had been more furious than Luke had ever seen him. What would you do with a girl like Catherine once you had her? The accurate punch of that statement hit him square on the jaw. What he wanted to do, and what his own moral code demanded he do, were polar opposites. He was a man who thrived on sampling. Catherine Ann Harris was a keeper. The promise to always be her big brother hadn't been made lightly. His depth of sincerity had been in direct proportion to the hurt and anguish he'd inflicted on her. He wouldn't renege on that now. Even if Kat was sharpening her inexperienced claws on his heart right now, he couldn't go back on his word. He went through the promise about 39 times in his mind. Bottom line, he'd promised himself and his dad that he would take care of Kat. Taking care of Kat meant putting her best interests ahead of his own, ahead of his marauding testosterone, his own lust, his own desires. He was a mature adult, not a hormone-driven adolescent. He could deny himself. He could control his base urges. No one had ever died of lust, as far as he knew. He resigned himself to being horny for however long it took Kat to find what she was looking for. When she was settled, he could take care of his own physical needs. Luke didn't want to consider why he couldn't take care of those needs while seeing to Kat's happiness. The two seemed somehow entwined in his mind. If he couldn't have Kat, he didn't want anyone else. Frustrated, but determined to stick to the letter of the law, he groaned. From the next stall, someone pounded on the dividing wall. "Get yourself a girl, mister!"